Chapter 1 of Book 6 of Metaphysics by Aristotle. Entity is denominated in many ways, as we have previously made the division in the case of those statements relating to its multifarious predications. For one signification of entity is, quote, the what a thing is, close quote, or quiddity, and this certain particular thing. And another is quality, or quantity, or each of the rest of the things that are so predicated. Now, seeing that entity is spoken of in thus many ways, it is evident that the first entity amongst these is quiddity, or, quote, the what a thing is, close quote, which signifies substance. For when we say that this particular thing is of a certain quality, we term it either good or bad, but not as of 3 cubits, or that it is a man. When, however, we say what a thing is, we term it not white, or warm, or of 3 cubits, but a man, or a god. But the other entities are denominated so in regard of belonging to entity that is really such. Some, to wit, as being quantities, and some qualities, and some passions, and others some other things of the sort. Wherefore, one might feel perplexed as to whether walking, and health, and sitting were each of them an entity or a nonentity. And in like manner also is it the case with any whatsoever of the other things of this kind, respecting which similar doubts are entertained. For none of them is adapted by nature either to subsist essentially, or is capable of being separated from substance. But rather, if I may express myself so, this is to be said of any amongst the entities which is walking, and sitting, and being in sound health. And these rather than those appear to be entities, because they have some definite subject, and this is substance, and the singular, which appears in the category of this kind. For that which is good, or the sitting posture, is not expressed without this also. It is evident, therefore, that each of those also subsists on account of this. Wherefore, that which is primarily entity, and not any particular entity, but entity simply, or absolutely, will constitute substance. Therefore, that which is first is denominated in many ways. Nevertheless, first of all is substance, both in reason and knowledge, and time and nature. For no one of the rest of the categories is capable of a separate subsistence, but this alone. And in definition is this first. For in the definition of everything there is a necessity that the definition of substance be inherent. And then we think we know each particular thing, especially when we know what man is, or fire is, rather than when we know the quality, or the quantity, or the situation of a thing. Since we then come to know each of these things when we know what the quantity of them is, or the quality. And unquestionably also was that originally, and at the present time, and always a subject of investigation, and invariably of doubt, namely, what entity is, that is, what substance is. For some say that this is one, but others that it is more than one. And some maintain that things which are finite are this entity, but others things that are infinite. Wherefore also, especially, and primarily, and exclusively, as I may say, we must investigate concerning that which subsists as entity after this manner, as to what it is. Chapter 2. Now, substance seems to subsist, no doubt, in bodies most palpably. Wherefore, we say that both animals and plants, and the parts of them, are substances. And we say the same of natural or physical bodies, as fire, and water, and earth, and everything of this sort, and as many as are either parts of these, or are composed of these, either partly or entirely, as both the heaven and its parts, stars and moon and sun. Whether, however, these are the only substances, or whether there are others besides, or whether no one of these, but certain different ones, are substances, this must be examined into. But to some the boundaries of bodies, as superficies, and line, and point, and monad, seem to be substances, and that, too, rather than body and solidity. Further, with the exception of things that are sensible, some are not of opinion that there is anything in existence of the kind, but others that there are many such, and that especially those entities have a subsistence which are eternal, as Plato considered both forms and mathematical entities as two substances, and as a third the substance of sensible bodies. But Speusippus, starting from one, says that there are many substances and first principles of each substance, one of numbers, but another of magnitudes, then another of soul, and in this way extends therefore the classes of substance. And some affirm that forms and numbers have the same nature, but that other things that are connected therewith, as lines and surfaces, belong to a second class of substances, as far as to the substance of the heaven, and to sensibles. Accordingly, respecting these, we must consider what it is that is said well or not well, and what substances exist, and whether there are certain ones besides sensibles, or are not, and how these subsist. Also, whether there is any separable substance, and why there is, and after what mode of subsistence, or whether there is no substance besides sensibles. This, I say, must form the subject of our investigation, having first delineated substance in a sketch of what it is. Chapter 3. Now, substance is denominated, if not multifariously, yet at least in 4 ways particularly. For both the essence or the formal cause, and the universal and the genus, seem to be substance in each thing, and fourth of these is the subject. But the subject is that of which other things are predicated, while itself is no longer predicated of any other thing. Wherefore, concerning this point, we must come to a determination in the first instance, for substance appears especially to be the primary subject. Now, in some such manner is matter denominated substance, but in another way form, and in a third that which results from, or is a compound of these. Now, I mean by matter brass, for instance, but by form the figure of the idea, and by that which is composed of these, the statue in its entirety. Wherefore, if form be prior to matter, and rather than it is entity or being, also for the same reason will be prior that which is a compound of both. Now, therefore, by way of a rough delineation, has it been declared what substance is at all, namely, that it is not that which is predicated of the subject, but is that of which other things are predicated. It must needs, however, be spoken of not in this manner solely, for such is not sufficient, for this account of it is obscure. And further, matter becomes substance, for if matter is not substance, what else is escapes our comprehension. For when other things are removed away, nothing appears remaining. For other things are the passive conditions of bodies, and are productions and potentialities. But length and breadth and depth are certain quantities, but not substances. For quantity is not substance, but rather that wherein these very qualities are inherent primarily, that is substance. But unquestionably, if we take away length, and depth, and breadth, we see nothing left except whatsoever is bounded by these. Wherefore, to persons conducting the inquiry in this way, matter must needs appear only as substance, and I call matter that which essentially is termed neither quiddity nor quantity, nor anything else of those things whereby entity is defined. For there is something of which each of these is predicated from which, the being, is different, as well as from each of the categories. For the other things are predicated of substance, but this of matter. Wherefore, that which is ultimate essentially is neither quiddity, nor quantity, nor quality, nor any other such thing. Neither, therefore, are negations so, for these also will have a subsistence according to accident. In consequence of these things, no doubt, therefore, it happens with speculators that matter is regarded as substance. This, however, is impossible, for both a capability of separation in its subsistence and the subsisting as this particular thing seem to inhere especially in substance. Wherefore, form, and that which is composed of both, would appear to be substance rather than matter. Indeed, then, as regards the substance which is composed of both, I mean composed of matter and form, the consideration of this must be omitted, for it is posterior and manifest. But somehow matter also is plain. But respecting the third substance must there be an inquiry made, for this is most perplexing. Now, certain substances of sensibles are acknowledged to exist. Wherefore, in the case of these, let us in the first place institute an examination. Chapter 4. But since in the beginning of this book we have made a division in how many ways we define substance, and of these a certain one seems to be the essence or the very nature of a thing, we must make an inquiry respecting this, for advantageous is the transition to what is more known. For in this way is instruction imparted to all by means of advancing through those things that are less known to nature to things that are more known. And this is something accomplished, as in practical things, the having made from those things that are good to each, things that are good to each generally. So from things that are more known to oneself, the having made things that are known to himself, to be known to nature, as well as things that are known to individuals, and such as are first, and are often but little known, and often involve little or nothing of entity. Nevertheless, however, from things badly known, to be sure, yet known to oneself, must we endeavour to attain a knowledge of things generally known, making a transition, as has been stated, by the way of these very things. And, in the first place, let us speak thereof some things logically, because the very nature of everything is that which is denominated as subsisting essentially or absolutely. For your essence does not consist in being in one that is musical, for not according to yourself are you musical. Your essence then subsists according to yourself. For, truly, not everything that is essentially present to a thing is the very nature of that thing. For that is not the case with that which is so essentially present, as a white surface, since the being of a surface is not the same thing with the being of what is white. But, doubtless, neither is that which is composed of both, namely, the being of a white surface, the same as the essence of superficies. Should the question be asked, why it is not, our reply is, because superficies is contained in the definition of white surface. In whatever definition, then, expressive of this will not be found inherent. This will be the reason of the essence or very nature of each thing. Wherefore, if the being of a white surface is the being of a smooth surface, the being white and smooth is one and the same thing. But since also, in accordance with the rest of the categories, there are natures that are composite, for there is a certain subject to each as to quality and quantity, and the time when, and the place where, and motion, we must examine if there is a definition of the very nature or essence of each of them, and also whether the essence of a thing is inherent in these, as, for example, if in man the essence of white man is inherent. Now, let his name be garment. What, then, is the being of a garment? But, doubtless, neither does this belong to those things that are expressed absolutely, or shall we say that a thing which is not essential is predicated in two ways, and that of this the one is from addition, but the other is not so? And in regard of this being added to another thing, it is denominated as that which is defined. For instance, if one, defining the being white, should assume the definition of white man, another thing is so denominated, because something else is not added to it. For example, if a garment signifies a white man, but some one should define the garment as white, in this case a white man is, doubtless, something that is white. Yet his essence, or very nature, does not consist in being white, but in being a garment. Is there, then, in short, in existence, such a thing as the essence or very nature of entities, or not? For whatsoever is the very nature of a thing is the essence of that thing. But when one thing is predicated of another, it is not this certain particular thing, as, for instance, a white man is not this certain particular thing, if the being this particular thing belong to substances only. Wherefore, the very nature of a thing appertains to those things the discourse respecting which is a definition. But not every discursus which signifies the same thing as the name is a definition, for in this case all discourses would be definitions. For the name will be the same with any discourse whatsoever. Wherefore also the term Iliad will be a definition. But if it may be one of some primary thing, a discourse is then a definition, and things of this kind are such as are spoken of not in respect of the predication of one thing of another. The very nature of a thing will not, accordingly, be found in any of those things that are not the species of a genus, but in these only. For these seem to be predicated not according to participation and passion, nor as an accident. But no doubt there will be a discourse of each thing, and it will signify something of the other things, if it be a name. I mean that this particular thing is inherent in this, or instead of the simple assertion, is there one that is more accurate, but it will not be a definition, nor the essence or very nature of a thing. Or also, shall we say that definition as well as the essence of a thing is expressed in many ways? For also the inquiry what the nature of a thing is, in one way signifies substance, and the being this particular thing, but in another each of the categories, quantity, quality, and whatever things else there are of this sort. For as the inquiry what a thing is also belongs to all things, though not after a similar manner, but to one thing primarily, and to others in a consequent order, so also the nature of a thing inheres in the substance simply, but in other things in a sort of a way. For also, as to the quality of a thing, we could ask the question what it is. Wherefore, likewise, quality belongs to those things to which the inquiry what they are appertains, but not simply considered, but just as in the case of nonentity, certain speculators say that it is nonentity, logically speaking, not simply, but that it is nonentity, so also is it with respect to quality. It is necessary, therefore, to examine also how one should speak of everything, not, certainly, at any rate, more than how each thing subsists or is disposed. Wherefore now, also, since what is spoken is manifest, the very nature or essence of a thing will also in like manner be inherent primarily and simply in substance, and afterwards in other things, as in the inquiry what a thing is, the essence or very nature of that thing will not be inherent simply, but with the addition of quality or quantity will the essence be inherent. For it is requisite to speak of the existence of these entities either equivocally or with addition and ablation, as also that which is not the object of scientific knowledge is a thing that may be scientifically known, since this is correct at least, neither to speak of these equivocally, nor in like manner, but just in such a way as what is medicinal is predicated in reference to one and the same thing, without, however, being one and the same thing, and yet, indeed, is not equivocally predicated either. For no medicinal body is termed a work and an apparatus either equivocally or according to one, but in relation to one thing. Therefore, in whatsoever way one chooses indeed to express these things makes no difference. This, however, is evident, that definition primarily and absolutely considered, and that the essence or very nature of a thing belong to substances. Notwithstanding, they belong to other things also, in a similar manner, except not primarily. For there is no necessity, even though we should admit that a name has the same signification with a certain discourse, that a discourse about that which the name signifies should be a definition of this. But this will take place if the name may have the same signification with a discourse, at least a certain discourse. And this takes place if it be of one thing, not by continuity, as the Iliad, or whatever things else are one by connection, but if it is as multifariously expressed as one thing is. Unity, however, is predicated in as many ways as entity, and entity signifies partly this particular thing, and partly quantity, and partly quality. Wherefore also of white man will there be a certain discourse and definition, and in another way will there be the same, both of that which is white and of substance. Chapter 5. This statement, however, involves a doubt, in case any one denies definition to be a discourse subsisting from addition, of what the definition will be of those things that are not simple, but connected together. For from addition it is necessary to make them manifest. Now, I say, for instance, there is nose and hollowness and flatness of nose. I mean, that which is called from both of these in respect of this being inherent in that. And neither the hollowness nor the flatness of nose is, according to accident at least, a passion of nose, but subsists essentially, nor do they subsist as the white in Callias, or man, because Callias is white, to whom it is an accident to be man, but they subsist as the male in animal, and the equal in quantity, and in the same way as all those things that are said to be essentially inherent. But these are those in whatsoever is inherent either the definition or the name of which this is an affection, and which it is not possible to manifest separately, as it is possible to make manifest the white without man. Not so, however, the female without animal. Wherefore, the very nature and definition of these are either of nothing, or if there is a definition of these, it is in a manner otherwise from what we have declared. And there is also another matter of doubt about these. For if in truth a flat nose and a hollow nose are the same thing will be the flat and the hollow. But if not, on account of its being impossible to use the word flat even without the thing of which it is an essential affection, and if flatness of nose will be a hollowness in the nose, the speaking of flat nose either is a thing not possible, or the same thing will be said twice over, as thus nose is hollow nose, for the nose that is the flat nose will be a hollow nose. Wherefore the inherence in things of this sort of what is the essence or formal principle would be absurd, and if it were not absurd, there would be a progression ad infinitum. For in a nose, a flat nose, will there further be inherent something else that is essential. It is evident, therefore, that of substance only is their definition. For if it were also of the rest of the categories, it must needs be from addition, as in the definition of quality and unevenness. For it is not framed without number, nor is the definition of female framed without animal. Now, definitions formed from addition I call those in whatever the same things happen to be said twice, as in these. And if this be true, neither will there be definition of those things that are conjoined together as of an odd number. It escapes their notice, however, that not accurately are the definitions of these things expressed by them. But if there are definitions of these things also, doubtless in a different way do they subsist. Or, as has been affirmed, definition must be spoken of as subsisting in many ways, and so with the essence, or the very nature of a thing, likewise. Wherefore, in one way, there will not be a definition of any of these, nor will essence be inherent in any one of these, save in substances, and in another way they will be inherent. That therefore, indeed, definition is a discursus or description of the very nature or essence of a thing, and that the essence or formal principle belongs either to substances only, or especially both primarily and simply, is manifest. End of chapter 5 of book 6. Chapter 6. Let us now consider whether the essence or very nature of a thing and each individual thing are the same or different, for this will be of advantage in reference to the inquiry concerning substance. For both each particular thing does not seem to be different from its own substance, and the essence, or very nature of each thing, is said to be the substance of that thing. Therefore, in the case, no doubt, of things that are predicated according to accident, these would seem to be different, as that a white man is a thing different from the being of white man. For if they were the same, both the being of man and the being of white man would be the same. For man and white man, as they say, are the same thing. Wherefore also the being of a white man and the being of man would be the same. Or is there no necessity for whatever things that are according to accident to be the same as those things that have an essential subsistence? For not in like manner do the extremes become the same. But perhaps at least it would seem to happen that the extremes should become the same according to accident, as for instance the being of white and the being of a musician, but this does not seem to be the case. And as regards things that are predicated absolutely, there always is a necessity that they be the same, as must take place if there are certain substances belonging to which there are not different substances, nor different antecedent natures, such as some affirm ideas to be. For if the actual good be a different thing from the being good, and animal from the being animal, and entity from the essence of entity, there will exist both different substances and natures and ideas besides those mentioned, and those substances will be prior if there be in existence the essence of substance. And if they are indeed unconnected one with another, of such there will not be a scientific knowledge, and they will not be entities. Now, I mean by the phrase, quote, unconnected, close quote, if neither in the actual good is inherent the being good, nor if the existence of good pertains to this. For the scientific knowledge of each thing subsists when we know the essence or very nature of each thing. And in the case of what is good, and of other things, the same takes place. Wherefore, if the being good be not good, neither will the being in entity constitute entity, nor that in unity be unity. In like manner also, all or not one of the essences will have an existence. Wherefore, if neither it be so with the being in entity, neither will it be so with anything else. Further, in whatever is not inherent, the being good is not good. Accordingly, it is necessary that the good and the being of good be one, also the fair and the being fair. In fact, whatsoever things are not predicated of another, but have an absolute subsistence, and are things which are primary. For also this is sufficient if it takes place, even though forms may have no existence, but rather perhaps if forms do subsist. But at the same time it is evident that also if ideas are such things as some say they are, the subject of them will not be substance. For it is necessary that these be substances, I admit, but it is not necessary that they be predicated of a subject, for in this will they be inherent by participation. And, doubtless, from these arguments it is evident that each particular itself and the essence, not according to accident, are one and the same thing, and that to have a scientific knowledge at any rate of anything is to know scientifically the very nature or essence of that thing. Wherefore, according to this exposition, it is requisite that both be a certain one thing. But that a thing predicated according to accident, as the musical or white, should be the same as the very nature of a thing itself, on account of the twofold signification of that in which it is an accident, and the accident itself, this is not a true assertion, so that in a certain respect a thing itself is the same, and in a certain respect is not the same with the very nature of that thing. For the being of man is not the same with that of a white man, but so far as the essence of man is passive to whiteness, it is the same. Now, it would appear absurd also if any would impose the name on each thing of the essences, for there will be another essence besides also that, as besides the essence of horse there will be a different essence of horse, although what hinders certain essences even from being now directly the same as the things of which they are the very natures, if the very nature of a thing be substance? But truly, not only are they one, but also the definition of them is the same, as is also evident from the statements that have been made. For to be one and one are not according to accident. Further, if they be different, they will go on in a progression ad infinitum. For the one will be the essence of being one, but the other the one itself. Wherefore also, in the case of those, will there be the same definition. That, therefore, in the case of the first existences, and of things predicated essentially, the being of each thing, and that very thing itself, are one and the same thing, is evident. As regards, however, the refutations of the sophists in reference to this position, it is palpable that they are decided by the same solution. For example, these sophists inquire whether Socrates and the being Socrates are the same. For there is no difference in the things either from which one would ask the question, or from which he should light upon an answer in his attempted solution of it. How then the essence or very nature is the same, and how it is not the same with each particular thing, has been declared. Chapter 7. Now, of things that are being produced, some are produced by nature, and others by art, and others from chance. All things, however, that are produced by means of something, and from something, and become something. But I mean that they become something according to each category, for they are generated either as quiddity, or quantity, or quality, or the place where. But generations, the physical or natural ones, I mean, are those, unquestionably, of which the generation is from nature, and that from which they are generated is that which we denominate matter. But that by means of which they are generated belongs to some one of those things which have a subsistence by nature, and that which is some particular thing is man, or plant, or some one of the things of that sort which we affirm to be especially substances. Now, all things which are produced either by nature or art involve matter, for it is possible for each of them both to be and not to be. This capability, however, is the matter in each, and in general, nature is even that from which a thing proceeds, and that according to which entities are generated is nature likewise. For that which is being produced has a nature, as, for example, a plant or animal, and that by means of which a thing is generated is nature herself, which is predicated according to the species, and is of the same species. But this is inherent in another, for man begets man. In this way, therefore, are produced the things that are generated through nature, and the rest of the generations are denominated productions, or operations. All operations, however, are either from art, or from potentiality, or the understanding. But of these, some are produced also from chance, and from fortune in a similar way, as in the case of those things that are produced by nature. For there also are produced some things that are the same both from seed and without seed. Respecting indeed these, then, we will subsequently institute an examination. From art, however, are generated those things of whatsoever there is a form in the soul. But I mean by form the essence or very nature of each thing, and the first substance. For also of contraries in a certain manner is there the same form, for thus the substance of privation is the substance that is the one opposed, as health of disease. For by the absence of health is disease made apparent, and health constitutes the principle in the soul and in the science. The salubrious, however, is produced when the physician reasons thus: since this is done for the sake of health, it is necessary, if this will be salubrious, that this particular condition should exist, for example, evenness, and if this take place, that the result be heat. And so he always reasons until he conducts you to that which he himself can accomplish last. Accordingly now, the motion which begins from these is called the operation that tends towards becoming healthy. Wherefore it happens that in a certain manner from health is generated health, and a house is constructed from a house, namely, that which involves matter arises, or is generated from that which does not involve a connection with matter. For the medicinal and the house-building arts are the form, the one of health and the other of a house. Now, I mean by substance not involving any connection with matter, the essence or very nature or formal cause of a thing. Of generations, however, and of motions, one is termed thought, and another operation. That is termed conception, or thought, which arises from the first principle and the form. But that is operation, which takes its rise from the thought or conception of what is ultimate. In like manner, also, is produced each of the rest of those things that are media. Now, I say, for instance, if health is to be restored, there must needs be a reduction to equality secured. What, then, is this reduction into a state of equality? It is this particular result. But this particular result will take place if heat shall have been promoted. And what is this? It is this particular effect. Now, this effect is inherent in capacity, but the former already lies in the power of the physician. Now, that which brings about the result, and whence the motion of restoring health derives its beginning, if it springs from art, such is the form that is in the soul. But if it arises from chance, it arises from that evidently which, for once, is the principle of bringing about the change to one that acts from art. As also, perhaps, in the case of restoring health, the first principle originates from the communication of heat, and this result is accomplished by means of friction. Accordingly, heat is either a part of health, I mean, such heat as inheres in the body, or there follows it directly some such thing as is a part of health, or this is accomplished indirectly, that is, by means of many media. This last, however, is that which produces the result, and in this way is part of health, as stones are parts of a house, and something else a part of other things. Wherefore, as it is said, it is impossible that there be a production of anything, if nothing may pre-exist. That certainly, therefore, a portion will exist necessarily is evident, for matter is that part. For this is inherent, and is itself produced. But then, as such, is it to be classed amongst those things that are contained in the definition. And in both ways we denominate the brazen circles what they are, speaking of both the matter that it is brass, and the form that it is such a figure, and this is the genus into which it is first posited. But a brazen circle involves matter in its definition. But that from which, as from matter, some things are formed is styled, when it is so formed, not that from which they are formed, but is called something else that is of this, as, for example, a statue is called not a stone, but of stone, or stony, and a man who is in a state of convalescence is not denominated that from which he recovers back his health. And a cause of this is the following, that arises from privation, and the subject which we call matter, as both a man and a person that is indisposed become healthy. Rather, however, is health said to arise from privation, as one in health from one that is indisposed, than from man. Wherefore, a sick person is not denominated as one that is sound in health, but this is affirmed of man, and a man who is in sound health. And in regard of those things of which the privation is obscure and nameless, as in the case of the brass, whatever be the figure, or in the bricks and timbers of a house, those things seem to arise from these, as in the instance above adduced, one that is in health from a person that is indisposed. Wherefore, as neither that which is produced is called by the name of that from which it is formed, in the case of the instance above adduced, so neither in this instance is the statue called wood, but derivatively is classified as wooden, not wood, and as brazen, but not brass, and stony, but not stone, and a house also is spoken of as made of bricks, but not as bricks, since if one carefully examines, he would not say absolutely that either is the statue produced from wood, or a house from bricks, on account of its being necessary that whatever is produced from anything should be changed from that from which it is produced, but should not continue as it was before. Therefore, on account of this indeed, the thing is expressed in this manner. Chapter 8. Since, however, that which is produced both by something, now I mean that whence also originates the first principle of generation, that is, its efficient cause, and from something, but let this be not privation, but matter, for already has it been defined in what manner we have denominated this. Also must there be that which is produced, and this is either a sphere, or a circle, or whatever else of the other things that may chance to present itself, as neither the efficient cause produces the subject, I mean the brass, so neither does it make the sphere, unless by accident, because a brazen sphere is a sphere, but it does not produce the sphere itself. For the production of a certain thing of this kind is the production of this particular thing from the entire subject. Now, I say that to make the brass round is not to make the round or the sphere, but something different, such as this form in another thing. For if the artist produces it, he would produce this from something else. For this would be the subject, as, for example, to make a brazen sphere, and this the artist makes in this manner, because from this particular thing which is brass, he forms this which is a sphere. If, therefore, also he produces this very thing, it is evident that in like manner he will produce another, and the productions will go on in a process ad infinitum. It is palpable, then, that neither form, or by whatever name we must needs term form, as it subsists in that which is cognizable to sense, is produced, nor is there a generation thereof, nor is this the essence or very nature of a thing. For this is that which is produced in another subject either from art, or from nature, or potentiality, and the efficient cause it is which produces the existence of a brazen sphere, for it produces it from brass, and a sphere, for into this particular thing which is the form doth the efficient cause mould the brass, and this constitutes a brazen sphere. And if, in short, of the being or existence of sphere there exists a generation, it will be a something that is a generation from a certain thing, for it will be necessary that what is produced always be divisible, and that this should be this particular thing, and that should be something else. Now, I mean that this should be matter, and that form. Therefore, if a sphere be a figure equal from the centre to all points of its periphery, of this one part will be that in which that which produces will be inherent, and the other part that which resides in this part, but the whole is that which has been produced or generated, as for instance the brazen sphere. It is evident, therefore, from the statements that have been made, that what is denominated as form, or as substance, is not generated, but that the union which is said to take place according to this is generated, and that in everything which is being produced matter is inherent, and that one part is matter, but the other form. Whether, then, is there any sphere besides these components, or is there a house besides the bricks, or shall we say that if this were the case, neither would this particular thing ever have been produced, save that it signifies a particular thing of this sort? This, however, also is not defined, but it produces and generates such a particular kind of thing from this particular thing, and when it has been generated, it is this particular thing with such a quality. And the whole of this particular thing is Callias or Socrates, just as this is a brazen sphere, and man and animal are, in general, as the brazen sphere. It is evident, therefore, that the cause of forms, as some have been accustomed to denominate forms, if there are certain natures of this sort in existence besides singulars, in no wise is useful towards both generations and substances. Nor would essential substances have a subsistence on account of these at least. It is accordingly evident that in the case of some things also, the generator is such as that which is being produced or generated, not, I admit, the actual thing itself at least, not so numerically, but specifically, as may be observed to take place in natural phenomena. For man generates man, unless something abnormal or contrary to nature be produced, as when a horse begets a mule. And with these is it in like manner. For that which would be common to a horse and an ass, namely the most proximate genus, would not have a name imposed upon it, but both perhaps would be as a mule. Wherefore it is plain that it is in no wise necessary to provide a form as an exemplar or model, for in these, that is, in things sensible especially, investigators from time to time have searched for them. For these same, in an eminent degree, are substances. But for the generator it sufficeth to have produced, and to be the cause of the subsistence of form in matter. And the entire now of such a form in these things, such as flesh and bones, is Callias and Socrates, and different, no doubt, is a thing on account of the matter thereof. For matter in each thing is different, but in form it is the same, for the form is indivisible. Chapter 9. Some one, however, may doubt perhaps why some things are produced by both art and from chance, as health, but other things are not produced in this way, as a house. Now a cause of this is the following, that the matter of these, which is the first principle of generation, consists in the accomplishing and the production of something of those things that are artificially formed, in which there is inherent a certain portion of the thing, which matter is partly of such a kind as is capable of being moved by itself, and partly is not so. And of this one part is it possible to move in this particular way, but the other it is not possible. For many things involve the capacity of being moved by themselves, but not in this way, for instance to leap. As regards those things, therefore, of which the matter is of such a kind, as stones, it is impossible for them to be moved in this way, unless by something else, yet in this way assuredly, and it is so with fire. On account of this, some things will not be without that which is in possession of art, whereas other things will be, for they will be moved by those things which do not possess art, no doubt, but are themselves capable of being moved either by other things which do not possess art, or possess it partially. but it is evident from the statements that have been made that also all things in a certain manner are generated from things that are equivocal, as those that have a subsistence from nature, or from an equivocal portion, for example, a house from a house, or by reason of intellect. For art is form, either from a part, or from that which possesses a certain part, if it be not produced according to accident. For the cause of the production is an essential first portion. For the heat which is involved in motion has generated heat in the body, and this is, unquestionably, health, or a part of health, or there follows it a certain part of health, or health itself. Wherefore also it is said to be a producer, because that produces health, on which heat follows, and to which it is an accident. Wherefore, as in the syllogisms, substance is the first principle of all things, for from the nature of a thing are syllogisms, so also in this instance are generations, and in like manner also with these are those things that are by nature constituted. For the seed produces as things that are constructed from art, for it involves form in capacity, and that from which the seed originates is, in a manner, equivocal, for it is not necessary to investigate all things in this way, as man is from man, for woman also is from man. Wherefore, mule does not originate from mule, save unless there be an injury from mutilation. Thus, as many things, however, as are being produced from chance, just as in that instance, are those the matter of which is capable also of being moved by itself with that motion which the seed effects. But those things the matter of which does not possess this capability, it is impossible can be produced in any other way except from themselves by generation. Not only, however, does this reasoning concerning substance manifest the non-production of form, but in like manner concerning all that are primary natures there is involved the same reasoning in common as of quantity, quality, and the rest of the categories. For as the brazen sphere is what is produced, but not the sphere or the brass, and as it is so in the case of brass, if it is what is produced, for always it is necessary that there pre-exist matter and form, so also must it be in the case of the what anything is, or quiddity, and in the case of quality and quantity, and similarly of the rest of the categories. For there quality is not produced, but such a sort of quality of wood, neither quantity, but such a measure or quantity of wood, or an animal of such a kind. But from these statements may we acquire what is a peculiarity of substance, namely, that there is a necessity that there should always pre-exist a different substance, I mean, one subsisting in a state of actuality, which produces, as for instance, an animal must pre-exist, if an animal is produced, but this is not necessarily the case with quality or quantity, unless in potentiality merely. End of chapter 9 of book 6. Chapter 10. But since definition is a sentence or explanation, and every sentence or explanation has parts, and as a sentence is similarly related to the thing itself, as the part of the sentence to the part of the thing itself, the doubt now suggests itself whether it is necessary that the definition of the parts should be inherent in the definition of the whole or not. In the case of some things they appear to be as things that are inherent, but in the case of others it is not so. For thus the definition of a circle does not involve that of its segments, but the definition of a syllable involves that of the letters of speech, notwithstanding that the circle also is divided into segments, as, likewise, is the syllable into letters or elements of speech. But further, if the parts are prior to the whole, and if the acute be a part of the right angle, and the finger of an animal, the acute would be a thing that is prior to a right angle, and the finger to man. Now, these do not seem to be prior, For in the definition they are denominated from them, and also are they prior in their being capable of subsistence without one another. Or shall we say that part is denominated in many ways, of which one mode is the measurement according to quantity? Let, however, the mode of the subsistence of this be omitted, but into those things of which substance is composed, as from parts, we must institute an investigation. If, therefore, the one be matter, but the other form, and the third that which is composed of these, and if substance be both matter and form, and that which consists from these, it is the case that also matter is termed in one respect a part of something, but it is the case that such is not so in another respect. But this is true as regards those things of which the definition of form consists. As, for instance, of hollowness, indeed, the flesh is not a portion, for this is matter from which hollowness is produced, but it is a certain portion of flatness of nose, and of the entire statue, no doubt, is the brass a part, but of that which is denominated as the form of the statue it is not so. For by form must we predicate, and so far forth as everything involves form. Never, however, is the material to be essentially predicated. Wherefore, the definition of a circle does not involve that of its segments, but that of a syllable does involve the definition of the elements of speech. For the elements of the definition are parts of form, and are not the matter thereof, but the segments of a circle thus are parts, as matter, in which the circle is ingenerated. They are, I admit, nearer to form than the brass when roundness is ingenerated in the brass, but it will be the case that neither all the elements of the syllable will be contained in the definition of syllable, as, for instance, these waxen letters, or those which are in the air, for now also are these a part of the syllable, as sensible matter. For also it does not follow that because a line if divided into halves is corrupted, or a man when divided into bones and nerves and flesh, that therefrom they are in such a manner, on this account, composed as though they were parts of the substance, but that they are composed from them, as from matter. And they are parts of the entire, to be sure, but they are not any longer parts of form, and of that about which the definition is concerned only. Wherefore, neither are they found in definitions. Of some definitions indeed, therefore, will there be inherent the definition of parts of this kind, and of others it is necessary that it be not inherent unless such be the definition of that which is taken together. For on this account, from these as from first principles do some things consist, into which they are corrupted, and others do not consist from these. Whatever things indeed, therefore, are assumed together are form and matter, as a flat nose or a brazen circle, those are corrupted into these, and matter constitutes a portion of them. But as many things as are not assumed along with matter, but involve no connection with matter, as the definitions of form merely, these, however, are not corrupted, either entirely or by no means in this way at least. Wherefore, things that fall not under these are the first principles and parts of those, but of the form are these neither parts nor first principles, and on this account a statue of clay is corrupted into clay, and a sphere of brass into brass, and callius into flesh and bones, and further a circle is corrupted into its segments, for there is something which is assumed along with matter. For equivocally is the circle predicated, both that which is predicated simply, and those that are singulars, on account of there not being a proper name for singulars. Therefore indeed also has the truth now been declared. Yet nevertheless let us express ourselves more clearly on resuming the subject. As many things, therefore, as are parts of the definition, and into which the definition is divided, these are prior, either all or some of them. But the definition of a right angle is not divided into the definition of an acute, but that of an acute angle is divided into the definition of a right angle. for a person who defines an acute employs a right angle, for the acute is less than the right. In like manner also is it the case with a circle and semicircle, for the semicircle is defined by the circle, and the finger by the whole, for such a part of a man is a finger. Wherefore, whatsoever parts involve such a relation as matter, and into which, as into matter, the whole is divided, are things subsequent. But as many as belong to the relation of definition, and of substance, which subsists according to the definition, are things that are prior, either all or some of them. Now, since the soul of animals, for this is the substance of that which is animated, constitutes the substance according to definition, and their form and the very nature or essence of such a body, if, at least, the part of each thing be properly defined, it will not be properly defined without mention of its appropriate function, and this, in the present case, will not subsist without sense. Wherefore, the parts of this, that is, of soul, are prior, either all or some of them, to the entire animal, and doubtless, similarly, is it with an individual thing. But the body and its parts are subsequent to this substance, and the substance is not divided into these as into matter, but the entire is. To the entire, therefore, these are, in a manner, prior, but in a manner are not prior, for neither are they capable of subsisting in a state of separation. For neither does finger belong to an animal when disposed in every way, but equivocally so termed is a dead finger. Now some things perish along with the whole, and these are principal parts wherein as first are inherent the definition and the substance, as for instance the heart or brain, if such be the principal part, for it makes no difference which of these is of such a kind. But man and horse, and those that are so, are found in singulars, and an universal substance does not subsist, but there will be a certain entirety composed from this reason, or formal principle, and this matter, as an universal. But as regards a singular consisting from ultimate matter, this is Socrates in the present instance, and the case is similar with other things. Therefore also is definition a portion both of the form, but by form I mean the essence or very nature of a thing, and of the universal that is composed from form and matter itself. But the parts of definition are only the parts of form, but a definition is of that which is universal. For the being of a circle, and the being of a soul, and a soul, are the same thing. And of that which is entire now, as of this circle, of any of the singulars, either sensible or intelligible. Now I mean by the intelligible, for example, the mathematical, but by the sensible, such as are made of brass and wood. Of these, however, I say there is no definition, save that they are known by the intervention of the intellect or sense, and when they are removed away from actuality, it is not evident whether they exist at all or do not exist, yet they are always expressed, and made known by universal definition. But the matter is unknown in itself. Now matter is partly sensible and partly intelligible. That which is sensible is such as brass and wood, and such as is movable. But intelligible matter is that which is inherent in things that are sensible, but not so far forth as they are sensible as mathematical entities. How indeed, therefore, this is so respecting the whole and part, and respecting the prior and subsequent, has been declared. But as to whether a right angle, and a circle, and an animal are prior to the parts into which they are divided, and of which they are composed, my reply to this question, when any one puts it, must necessarily be that not simply or absolutely are the parts predicated. For if also soul is an animal, or that which is animated, every animal is each animal's own soul. And if the circle constitute the being of a circle, and the right angle the being of the right angle, and the substance also the substance of the right angle, what particular thing, and belonging to what, as a substance, each of these is, we must state on a subsequent occasion, for instance, of those parts that are contained in the definition, and of a certain right angle. For both the angle of brass, which subsists in conjunction with matter, is a right angle, and that also contained within lines, I mean singular lines. But a right angle that involves no connection with matter is subsequent to those parts that are contained in the definition, and prior to those parts that are contained in the singular. But this is not to be affirmed of part absolutely. And if soul be something that is different, and does not constitute an animal, in this case must we both assert some parts to be prior, and other parts we must assert to be not prior, just as has been declared. Chapter 11. But it is a matter of doubt naturally what is the quality of the parts of form, and what sort the parts are not, but what kind the parts are, which belong to a composite nature. Although in case this is not evident, it is not possible to define each thing. For of that which is universal and of form is there the definition, as to which, therefore, of the parts are related as matter, and which are not so, if these be not manifest, neither will be manifest the definition of the thing. As many things indeed, therefore, as appear to be ingenerated in the form of different things, as a circle in brass, and stone, and wood, these then seem to be manifest because neither the brass nor the stone is anything of the substance of the circle consequent upon its separation from them. But as many things as are not perceived to be separated, there is no hindrance to their being similarly disposed with these, as if all circles were seen composed of brass. For, nevertheless, would the brass be in no wise a part of form, but it would be difficult in thought to abstract this. As, for instance, the form of man always appears in flesh and bones, and in such like parts. Are these, then, also parts of form, and of the definition, or are they not so, but matter merely? But on account of its not being ingenerated in another also, we find it impossible to separate it. And since this seems to be admissible, yet as to the time when this is obscure, certain philosophers now are involved in doubt in the case both of a circle and in the case of a triangle, as if it were not fitting for lines, and that which is contained within lines also to be defined by continuity, but that all should be predicated in a similar manner with the flesh or bones of a man, and the brass and stone of a statue. And they refer all things to numbers, and the definition of a line, they say, is that of the duad. Of those, likewise, who assert the existence of ideas, some make the actual line the duad, but others the form of the line. For in regard of some things, they say that form, and that of which the form is compounded, are the same, as, for instance, a duad and the form of the duad, but in the case of a line it is not so. There happens, therefore, to be one form of many things, of which the species appears to be different, which consequence also ensued in their system unto the Pythagoreans. And it is possible, as a result from this position, to make one actual form of all things, and that other things be not forms at all, although on this supposition will all things be one. That, therefore, those things involve a certain doubt, I mean those questions that have been started respecting definitions, and from what cause it is that they are thus attended with difficulty, this has been declared. Wherefore, both to reduce all things in this way, and to abstract matter, would be superfluous. For in the case of some things perhaps, this is in this, or these things are so disposed. And the comparison that is made in the case of an animal, which the junior Socrates was accustomed to employ, is not a good one, for it forcibly withdraws one away from the truth, and makes us suppose as possible that man should subsist without parts, as a circle without brass. But this latter instance is not similar to the former. For animal, perhaps, is something that is cognizant by sense, and which cannot be defined without motion. Wherefore, neither can it be defined without the parts somehow disposed. For not altogether is the hand a part of a man, but that which is able to accomplish the proper function of a hand. Wherefore, when it is animated it is a part, but when it is not animated it is not a part. Respecting, however, mathematical entities, why are not definitions parts of the definitions of such? For example, why are not semicircles parts of the definition of a circle? For these are not sensibles, or shall we say that this makes no difference, for they will be the matter of certain things, and of those that are not sensible, and of everything that is not the very nature or essence of a thing. These, then, will not be the parts of universal circle, but of singulars, as has been stated previously, for matter is partly sensible and partly intelligible, and it is evident also that the soul is the first substance, and that body is matter, but man or animal is the compound of both as universal. If the soul, however, be the form of such, Socrates and Coriscus are twofold. For some regard Socrates as soul, but others as an entirety. But if they be considered as this soul regarded simply, this body also will involve the relation of the universal and of the singular. Whether, however, beside the matter of such sort of substances, there is any other substance, and whether it is necessary to search for any different substance of these, as, for instance, numbers or some such thing, must afterwards be examined into. For on account of this, let us also endeavour to frame some distinctions respecting sensible substances, since in a certain manner the investigation regarding sensible substance is a work of the physical and second philosophy. For not only is it necessary for the natural philosopher to afford information respecting matter, but also respecting that substance which subsists according to the definition. Even still more. In the case, however, of definitions, in what manner are those parts which are assumed in the definition, and why definition is one reason? For it is evident that the thing is one, and that the thing is in a certain way one definite particular, which involves parts. This must subsequently be inquired into. What, therefore, is the essence of a thing, and how this subsists in itself, that is, absolutely, has been declared respecting everything universally, and why the definition of the essence of some things possesses the parts of that which is defined, but in other things why this is not the case, and why that in the definition indeed of substance the parts so constituted as matter are not inherent, this likewise has been declared. For they are not parts of that substance, but of the entire together, and of this there is at least in a manner a definition, and there is not so. For as involving a connection with matter, there is not a definition, for it is a thing that is indefinite, but according to the first substance there is, as for instance the definition of man is the definition of his soul. For the substance constitutes form, that is, such as is indwelling, from which and from matter the entire substance is denominated, as, for example, hollowness or concavity. For from this and nose a flat nose, and flatness are composed. For therein twice will a nose be inherent. In the substance, however, in its entirety, as in a flat nose, or calleus, is matter also inherent. And that the essence or very nature of a thing and a singular in the case of some things are the same, as in the case of primary substances. For instance, a curvature and the essence of a curvature, if it is primary, that these, I say, are the same, this has been declared. Now I mean by primary or first that which is not expressed in respect of one thing being inherent in another, and in a subject as matter, but as many things as subsist as matter, or as things involving a connection with matter. These are not the same, except that they are one according to accident, as Socrates and the musical, for these are the same according to accident. Chapter 12. Let us now, however, first discuss the subject, so far forth as there has been no statement made concerning definition in the Analytics. For the doubt that has been expressed in those inquiries is of advantage to our present dissertations respecting substance. Now, this doubt which I allude to is as follows. Quote, why, pray, a thing that is capable of definition, of which the reason we say is a definition, is one thing, as the definition of man is a two-footed animal. For let this stand as a definition of him. Now, why is this one thing, but not many, animal and two-footed? For also, in the case of man and white, they are many things when they are not inherent either in the other, but when the one is inherent in the other, and when the subject, viz. Man, undergoes any passive condition, they are one, for then a white man becomes and is one thing. Here, however, either does not partake of the other, for genus does not appear to participate in the differences, for in such a case would the same thing at the same time participate in contraries. For differences are contraries, wherein the genus differs, and if the genus does participate in the differences, the same reasoning holds good, even though the differences be many in number, for instance, having the capability of walking biped without wings. For why are these things one, but not many? For they are not one because they are inherent, for so indeed will there be one of all. But it is requisite that at any rate as many things as are contained in definition should be one, for definition is a certain single principle or reason, and belongs to substance. Wherefore, of one particular thing this must needs be a definition, for also substance signifies one certain particular thing, as we say. And it is necessary first to examine respecting those definitions which subsist according to divisions, for there is nothing else involved in definition unless the genus that is denominated first, and the differences, but the other things are genera, both that which is first and the differences comprehended along with this, as for instance, the first genus is animal, and that next in order to this is two-footed animal, and again two-footed animal without wings, and in like manner will it be the case if the definition be expressed by means of many distinctive qualities. In general, however, there is no difference whether it subsists by many such, or by few, or by two of them. Yet if a thing be defined by two distinctive qualities, the one will be difference and the other genus, as for instance of two-footed animal, animal is the genus, and the other, two-footed, is the difference. If, therefore, genus, simply considered, is not anything different from the species, as it were, of that genus, or if indeed it is, yet it is as matter, for voice is genus and matter, but the differences produce the forms and elements out of this, it is evident in such a case that a definition is a sentence, or discursus composed from differences. But therefore is it necessary likewise that the difference of the difference should at least be divided, as for example a difference belonging to animal, such as having the support of feet. Again, it is requisite to know the difference of the animal that possesses the differential quality of being supported on feet, as far forth as it is such, I mean, such as has the support of feet. Wherefore it is not proper to say that of an animal which has the support of feet. One sort we find with wings, and another without them, if one is to express himself correctly. But on account of the impossibility of making a proper division of the distinctive qualities, will one do this. But it is correct to say so if one kind has cloven, and another has feet that are not cloven, for these are the differences of foot. For a cloven foot is a certain quality of foot, and so always does one desire to go on making divisions of distinctive qualities until we come to things that do not involve any difference. But then will there be as many species of foot as there are differences, and the number of animals with feet supporting them will be equal to the differences. Now, if these things are so, it is evident that the ultimate difference will be the substance of the thing, and the definition of it, if it is not necessary to say oftentimes the same things in the case of definitions, for it would be superfluous. But this at least happens sometimes, for when one calls an animal that has feet supporting it a biped, he has said no more than this, viz. that an animal having the support of feet has 2 feet. And if you make a division of this by an appropriate difference, he will say the same thing frequently, and in an equal number of times with the differences. If indeed, therefore, a difference of a difference may be produced, one which is the ultimate difference will constitute form and substance. If, however, the division be made according to accident, as if one should make a division, in the case of the classes of that which has the support of feet, of one into white and another into black, so many differences or distinctive qualities will there be as there may be divisions of them. Wherefore it is evident that definition is a sentence that is composed from the things that are differences, and from the last of these that is drawn up in accordance with a correct classification at least. And this would be plain if one should transpose the arrangement of the terms of definitions of this kind, as, for example, that of a man saying, instead of the ordinary definition, animal biped having the support of feet. For superfluous would be the distinctive quality of having the support of feet on the supposition of the thing defined being denominated a biped. An arrangement of terms, however, does not exist in substance, for how is it necessary to understand the one as subsequent, but the other as prior? Respecting, then, definitions that subsist according to divisions of the distinctive qualities of the things defined, what sort they are, let thus much in the first instance be affirmed. End of chapter 12 of book 6. Chapter 13. But since our present investigation is concerning substance, let us once more take a review of the matter. Now, substance is said to subsist as the subject and the essence or very nature of a thing, and that which is composed from these is termed substance, and that which is universal. Respecting indeed, then, 2 of them have we declared our opinions already, for also we have done so in the case of the essence or very nature of a thing, and the subject, observing that in 2 ways it is a subject, either as being this certain particular thing, as an animal is the subject of its passive states, or it is as matter in a condition of actuality. But to some speculators doth the universal in an eminent degree appear to be a cause, and the universal appears to be a first principle also. Wherefore likewise, as regards this point, must we institute an inquiry. For it seems to be a thing impossible that substance should be anything whatsoever of those things that are denominated universal. For primary substance, to be sure, in everything is that which does not belong to another thing. That which is universal, however, is common, for that is said to be universal which by nature is fitted to be inherent in many things. Of what, then, will this be a substance? For either it will be a substance of all things or of nothing. But of all things it is not even possible that it should be a substance. And if it be the substance of one thing, other things also will be this. For those things of which the substance is one, and the essence or very nature one, will themselves likewise be one. Further is that denominated substance which is not predicated of a subject. The universal, however, is invariably predicated of a certain subject. But then shall we say that it is not possible, certainly, that it should subsist in such a way as the essence or very nature of a thing, but that it be inherent in this, for example, animal in man and horse. Therefore is it evident that there will be a certain definition of it, but there is no difference either if there is not a definition of all those things that are contained in the substance, for this, nevertheless, will be a substance of something, as man is the substance of man, wherein man is inherent. Wherefore the same consequence will again ensue, for substance will be substance of man, as, for instance, animal is substance in that species in which it is inherent as a peculiar property. And, further, the thing would be both impossible and absurd that this particular thing and substance, if they are composed from certain things, should not consist of substances, or of anything of the sort, but from quality. For that which is not substance and quality will be prior both to substance and this particular thing, an assertion that is impossible. For neither in definition, nor in time, nor in generation is it possible. Likewise, that the passive properties of a thing should be prior to the substance of it, for they will involve a subsistence separable from it. Moreover, in Socrates, who is a substance, will substance be inherent. Wherefore will Socrates be a substance in two substances. And in general, the result following ensues, if man is substance, and as many things as are thus expressed, that none of those things contained in definition is substance of anything, and that it has not a subsistence separable from them, nor does it subsist in another. Now, I mean, for example, that there is not any animal besides those certain particular ones, or anything else of those things that are contained in the definitions. Now, from these considerations also, it is evident to persons examining into the subject that nothing of those things that have an universal subsistence is substance, and that nothing of those things that are predicated in common signifies this certain particular thing, but a thing of such a quality. And if this be not admitted, many other consequences also will ensue, and amongst the rest, the consequence that there will be a third man. Further also, it is evident that the case stands thus, from the following remark, for it is impossible that substance should be compounded from substances which are inherent in such a manner as to subsist in actuality, for two things thus would subsist in actuality, yet they never would be one thing in actuality. But if they may be two things in potentiality, they will be one, as the twofold is compounded of two halves, at least in potentiality, for actuality in the case of others separates them. Wherefore, if the substance be one thing, it will not be compounded from substances that are inherent, and subsisting according to that mode which Democritus mentions correctly. For it is impossible, he says, that from two atoms should be generated one, or two from one, for he makes magnitudes that are indivisible to be substances. Therefore is it plain that also in the case of number this will take place in a similar manner, if number be a composition of monads, as is said by some speculators, for either the duad is not one, or it is not the monad that is involved in this actuality. But the result which ensues contains a matter of doubt. For if neither from the universals is it possible that any substance be compounded, on account of an animal signifying a thing of such a sort, but not this certain particular thing, neither is it possible that there subsists any substance from substances in actuality. I mean, that no composite nature can thus subsist. Now, on such a supposition, every substance would be a thing that is uncompounded. Wherefore, neither would there be a definition of any substance. But assuredly, it seems, at least, to all speculators, and has been laid down originally, that definition is conversant about substance, either solely or principally. But now the conclusion drawn is this, that neither is there definition of this, that is, of substance, nor will there be a definition of any one thing in such a case. Or shall we say that in a certain manner there will be, and in a certain manner there will not be, a definition of substance? What, however, that is which is affirmed will be more manifest from the sequel. Chapter 14. Now, from these very circumstances is evident the result which ensues to those both who say that ideas are as well substances as separable substances, and who at the same time constitute form out of the genus and the differences. For if forms and animal exist in man and in horse, there is undoubtedly one and the same, or a different animal in number. For by definition it is evident that there is one and the same, for the same definition does he assign who says that they are inherent in each. If therefore there is some man, an actual thing subsisting essentially, that is this certain particular individual thing, and one which has a separate subsistence, it is necessary also that those things from which they are composed, as for example animal and biped, should signify this certain particular individual thing, and should involve a separable subsistence, and be substances. Wherefore also this will be the case with animal. If, therefore, animal will be the same and one thing in horse and man, as yourself in yourself, how will it be one in things that subsist separately? And why will not this animal subsist likewise apart from itself? If in the next place it will participate in the properties of two-footed and many-footed, something which is impossible ensues. For contraries at the same time will be inherent in this, which is one thing, and this certain particular thing. And if this is not the case, what is the mode of subsistence when one affirms that an animal is two-footed or adapted for walking? Perchance, however, they are composites and are in contact with one another or have been mingled together, but all such suppositions as to the mode of subsistence in this case are absurd. Shall we say, however, that in each thing there subsists something that is different? Therefore, to speak the word, those things will be infinite of which the substance is animal, for not according to accident is man from animal. Moreover, many things will animal itself be, for animal which is contained in each individual is substance, for it is not predicated of anything else. And if this be not admitted, from that will man subsist, and that will be a genus of man, and further, all things from which man consists will be ideas. Therefore, idea will not be an idea of one thing, but a substance of another, for this is impossible. For in such a case each of those things that are contained in animals will be an animal itself. Further, will it subsist from this certain particular thing? And how will it subsist from this actual animal? Or how is it possible that animal should subsist, which is substance, as this very thing beside animal itself? Further also, in the case of sensibles, both these consequences ensue, and consequences still more absurd than these. If, therefore, it is impossible that this can be the case, it is evident that there is not an idea of them after such a mode as some would affirm. Chapter 15. But since both entirety and the formal cause are a different substance, now I say that the former is substance in this way as the formal cause that is comprehended along with matter, and that the latter is the formal cause in general. In regard of as many things then as are so denominated, of these truly is their corruption, for of these also is their generation. With form, however, there is not a disruption of parts in such a way as for dissolution to ensue, for neither exists their generation in this case. For the being of a house is not generated, but the being of this particular house. But forms subsist without any connection with generation and corruption, and do not subsist in a state of dependence upon either, for it has been demonstrated that no one generates or produces these. And on this account also of sensible substances, I mean, such as are singulars, there is neither definition nor demonstration, because they involve matter, the nature of which is such as to admit of the possibility both of being and not being. Wherefore, all the singulars of such are things subject to decay or corruption. If, therefore, also demonstration be of those things that are necessary, as well as that which is a scientific definition, and if it does not admit of being the case, as neither with scientific knowledge, that at one time it should be scientific knowledge, and at another time should be ignorance, but a thing of this kind is opinion, so neither is it to be admitted that demonstration nor definition should subsist after this mode. But such is an opinion in regard of that which admits of being disposed otherwise. It is evident, therefore, that there would not be either definition or demonstration of those things that may subsist differently. For also things that are subject to corruption or decay are obscure to those even that are in possession of scientific knowledge, when they pass away from under the notice of sense. And though the same reasons or principles be preserved in the soul, still will there not further exist thereof either definition or demonstration. Wherefore, as regards things relating to definition, when one defines any of the singulars, it is right that he should not be ignorant that always is it possible to overturn this definition, for a thing of this sort does not admit of definition. Neither, therefore, is it possible for any idea to be defined, for the idea ranks amongst singulars, as they say, and has likewise a separable subsistence, and it is necessary also that definition consist from names. But the person who is framing the definition will not create a name or nominative term, for it will be a thing unknown. The things, however, that are posited or acknowledged are common to all. It is necessary, then, that these also subsist in other things. For instance, even just as if one should define yourself, he would say that you are an animal which is attenuated or white, or something else that will be inherent also in another. If any one, however, would say that there is no hindrance to all things being separately inherent in many, but that all collectively belong to this alone, we must in the first place say that also they would belong to both, namely animal biped to animal and biped, and this must needs ensue, likewise in the case of things that are everlasting, since at any rate they are prior existences, and are parts of that which is a composite. But assuredly also are they separable, if the thing, man, be separable, for either nothing will be separable, or both will be so. If indeed, then, nothing may possess the capacity of a separate subsistence, there will not exist genus besides species. But if both are separable, there will exist the difference likewise. In the next place, because they are prior existences in respect of being, these also, on the contrary, will not be exposed to decay. And then if ideas spring from ideas, for more uncompounded are those things from which other composites arise, it will be necessary that those things from which the idea consists should be predicated further of many. For instance, take the case of animal and biped. But if this be not admitted, how shall a knowledge of these be attained? For there will be a certain idea which it will be impossible to predicate in the case of more things than one. This does not, however, seem to be the case, but every idea appears to be participable. As, therefore, it has been declared, it is overlooked by these persons that it is impossible to frame any definitions or distinctions in the case of things that are eternal, and eminently in the case of as many things as are single, for instance, the sun and moon. For not only do persons err in the addition of things of this sort, in the event of which, being taken away, still the sun will continue as that body which revolves around the earth, or which is hid by night. For if the sun were to stand still in his orbit, or were to become apparent by night, in such a case no longer will he be the sun. But the thing would be absurd if he were not, for the sun signifies a certain substance. Further, such persons take for granted whatsoever points admit of being affirmed of another thing, just as if something else should become a thing of this sort. It is evident that it will be the sun. The definition, then, is common, but the sun was classed amongst singulars in such a way as Cleon or Socrates, whereas why does no one of these bring forward a definition of idea? For it would become manifest to those who would attempt to prove the existence of such that what is now stated is true. Chapter 16. It is evident also that, likewise, the majority of those things which seem substances are capacities and parts of animals, for none of these involves a separate subsistence, but when they may be separated, then also are they all of them as matter. I mean such as both earth and fire and air, for none of these is one thing, but each, as it were, a heap of immatured things before they be digested, and some one thing produced from their being blended together. But particularly would one suppose the parts of animated beings, and those of the soul, to be both of them contiguous to an existence in this manner, as well in actuality as also in capacity, in respect of having the first principles of motion from something in their joints or flexures. Wherefore, some animals continue to retain life after being divided, but nevertheless will all of them subsist in capacity when they may be one thing, and that which is continuous by nature, but not by force, or by connascence, that is, growth in conjunction with something else, for a thing of this kind is mutilation. Since, however, unity is denominated as also entity is, and since the substance of unity is single, and those things of which there is one substance in number are one in number, it is evident that neither unity nor entity can possibly be the substance of things, as neither can the being of an element or first principle be the substance of things. But we are actually engaged in the inquiry. What, therefore, the first principle is, in order to conduct our investigation to that which is more known. The substance, then, indeed, of these is rather entity and unity than both the first principle and the element and the cause, but by no means are these substances either, if there be not anything else which is in common with substance. For in nothing is the substance inherent, but in itself, and in that which is in possession of itself, of which it is the substance. Further, unity would not subsist in many places at the same time. That which is common, however, does subsist in many places at the same time. Wherefore it is evident that nothing of those things that are universals can possess a subsistence separate from singulars. But they who affirm the existence of forms speak partly correct in assigning them a separable subsistence, if they be substances, but speak partly incorrect, because they assert unity to be a form in the case of many things. And the cause of this position with these Platonists is the following, that they have no rational account to render as to what are substances of this kind, I mean, such as are incorruptible and have a subsistence independent of singulars and sensibles. Therefore do they constitute them as the same in the species with things that are corruptible. For we know these, namely, ideal man and ideal horse, adding to sensibles the thing signified by the term ideal. Although, indeed, if we had not beheld the stars, yet this would be no hindrance, I presume, to the existence of eternal substances in addition to those which we have already attained a knowledge of. Wherefore also, though even now we may not have it in our power to see what eternal substances are, yet perhaps it will be necessary that there be some eternal substances in existence at any rate. That indeed, therefore, neither any of those reputed universals is substance, nor that there is any substance composed of substances, is evident. Chapter 17. But what, and what sort of a thing we ought to define substance, let us again declare, just as if having made another commencement. For perhaps from these statements will be evident the circumstances also concerning that substance which is separated from sensible substances. Since, therefore, substance is a certain first principle and cause, from this starting point must we pass onwards in our investigation. But the inquiry why a thing subsists is invariably carried on in this way, namely, why one thing is inherent in a certain other. For the investigation why a musical man is a musical man, indeed, is to engage in the inquiry that has been mentioned, namely, why, or on what account a man is musical, or it is to engage in the inquiry of something else. Therefore, in sooth, the investigation why this thing is the thing which it is no investigation at all. For it is necessary that the wherefore and the existence of a thing should inhere as manifest entities. Now I say, for instance, the moon undergoes an eclipse, and of the inquiry why a thing is that thing which it is, there is one principle and one cause in the case of all things, as on what account a man is a man, or a musician, except some one say that each thing is indivisible in regard to itself. But this would be to constitute unity. But this is both common in the case of all things, and is a thing that is concise. One, however, might inquire why man is that kind of an animal that he is. This, then, is evident that such a one does not investigate why he who is a man is a man. Accordingly, he engages in the inquiry why a certain thing subsists, as what is common in the case of something, but that it does so subsist ought to be evident. For if it be not thus, he inquires after nothing. As to take an instance, why does it thunder? Why? Because sound is produced in the clouds. For so one thing as the cause of another is that which is under investigation. And on what account do these things, as bricks and stones, constitute a house? It is evident, then, that he investigates the cause. But this is the essence or very nature of a thing, that is, if one is to express himself logically, which in the case of some things is that for the sake of which a thing subsists, that is, the final cause, as perhaps in the case of a house or a bed. But in the case of other things it is something that has imparted motion in the first instance, for this also is a cause. But a cause of this kind is such a cause as is sought for in the case of a thing that is being produced and destroyed, but the other cause also is sought for in the case of a thing already in existence. The subject of investigation, however, is in an eminent degree latent. I mean, such a one as is involved in the things that are mutually not predicated of one another, as for instance in the inquiry what man is, on account of its being asserted that he is simply so and so, but not from any definition being framed to the effect that he is this or that. It is requisite, however, if they conduct the inquiry correctly, to investigate such. But if not, it will be the case that nothing will be under investigation, and something under investigation in common. But since it is requisite to have in possession the being of a thing, and that it should subsist, it is evident that the inquiry is about matter, why it subsists, as, for instance, these particulars constitute a house. Why? Because these subsist as that which is the being of a house. Thus, too, is it in the inquiry why man is this particular thing, or why this body is in possession of this particular quality. The like inquiry is made. Wherefore, the cause of the matter is under investigation, but this is the form by which anything subsists, and this is substance. It is evident, therefore, that in the case of simple substances there is not any investigation in existence, nor any disciplinary teaching, but there is a different mode of investigation of things of this sort. Since, however, that which is compounded of something, and compounded in such a way as that the whole is one thing, but not as a heap, but as a syllable, yet a syllable is not the elements of speech, nor the same thing with the letters B and A. Nor is flesh the same with fire and earth, for when a dissolution of these takes place, flesh and syllable no longer exist, as in the instance of the flesh and the syllable, but the elements subsist, that is, the fire and earth continue to subsist. The syllable in this case is something besides not only the elements of speech, namely the vowel and the mute, but also something else, and the flesh not only is fire and earth, or the warm and the cold, but also something else. If, therefore, it is requisite that also flesh be either an element, or that which is compounded from elements, if it is an element, again will there be the same reasoning. For from this, even from fire and earth, will consist the flesh, and further, from something else, something different, so that the progression will go on to infinity. But if it be compounded from an element, it is evident that it will not consist of one, but many, or it will be that very thing itself. Wherefore, again, in the case of this, as in the case of the flesh, or syllable, we shall put forward the same reasoning. Now, it would seem that there is something of this sort, and that it is not an element, and the cause, at least, of this thing being flesh, but that a syllable. In like manner also is it concerning other things, but the substance of each thing constitutes this, in truth, for this is the first cause of being or substance. Since, however, some things are not substances of things, but this is the case with as many substances as according to nature are constituted as well as by nature, to some also would this nature appear to be substance, or it is not an element, but a first principle. Now, an element is that whereunto as inherent in a thing as matter a compound is divided, as for instance of the syllable a, b, a, and b are the elements. End of chapter 17 and end of book 6.